We are very grateful to our speakers today, first and foremost for Supervisor Pine for presenting some opening remarks, and then to our three speakers who are going to tell us a little bit more about what's going on in their organizations right now. Supervisor Pine has been a great friend of Thrive for a long time, so we're very happy to have him here. I'm going to give a quick bio of just some of his stuff, because he's been very involved in the environmental movement, and so I want to make sure that I hit some of the highlights. So as a board member for the San Francisco Bay Conservation and Development Commission, the San Francisco Bay Restoration Authority, the San Mateo County Flood and Sea Level Rise Resiliency District Board, the San Francisquito Creek Joint Powers Authority. Supervisor Pine has worked extensively on the intersecting issues of flood control, sea level rise, and tidal land restoration. He's also the founding chair of the Peninsula Clean Energy Authority and serves on the boards of the San Mateo County Transit District, SamTrans, the Peninsula Corridor Joint Powers Board, which is Caltrain, the Association of Bay Area Governments, and the Bay Area Regional Collaborative and Joint Venture Silicon Valley. So he has done a lot of other things as well, but those are going to keep it on the environment focused because we don't have all day to talk about all of the wonderful things that Supervisor Pine has done. But I will turn it over to Supervisor Pine. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice introduction. Great to join everyone this afternoon. It's really terrific to have what I think might be a 50+ people.
Yeah.
You know, gathering to talk about sustainability and our environment. I wanted to share just a couple of thoughts about the pandemic and how it intersects with climate change. But before doing that, I'm really excited to inform everyone, if you don't already know, that we've hired a new head of our Office of Sustainability. And her name is Carolyn Blody. And she will be a terrific leader of the Office of Sustainability. She has a similar job today. She heads up the Alameda County Sustainability Program, which actually started back in 2003 and has shepherded since that time. She has an engineering degree from San Jose State University and a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from University of Colorado. So she has kind of a very kind of rigorous, methodical perspective, which I think will serve us well. And then as an extra bonus, she resides in South San Francisco. So great to have a county person in this key job. And I know she's super eager to meet everyone and take on this new challenge. So just a couple words on the pandemic. Obviously, the pandemic is front and center. It occupies all our thoughts. But, meanwhile, the climate crisis hasn't gone away. I read that April 2020 tied for the hottest April ever in history, or modern history. And that CO2 now set a new record just this month at 418 parts per million. So our focus is on the pandemic, but the crisis of our time continues. So when I think about the pandemic and I think about climate change, I guess there's just three things that I'll share. One is, it sure is wonderful to enjoy the clean air and to have greater visibility and a lot less traffic and all this CO2 reduction, and to be able to hear the birds and see more wildlife. I think it gives us a preview of the kind of world we want to live in, where where we have a lot less carbon and we do have cleaner air, and we do enjoy nature. So it's kind of a sneak peek of hopefully what the future could be if we achieve our goals. On the other hand, I think the pandemic really points out how enormous the climate crisis challenge is. I've read that carbon emissions will have dropped about 17%, which is the largest drop since World War II. So that sounds fantastic. But I've also read that if we were to achieve our goal of keeping warming to 1.5 degrees centigrade, would have to drop emissions 7% a year for many, 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 many years in a row. So we have our work. But the other thing about the pandemic that hopefully we can take away from it as we at some point move back to normal living and focus more on climate and environmental issues, is we've really, we've seen government act incredibly decisively and effectively in really short order. I'm very proud of the way the county and the cities have come together to address the crisis here in our county, and all that's been accomplished. And everything has just happened with a real can-do attitude and cooperation amongst many different stakeholders. So it reminds us that people can come together and get things done when they have a sense of shared purpose and a sense of urgency. And if we can build that around the climate challenge, we'll get a lot more done. So just a couple thoughts I thought I'd share, and I'll turn it back to you, Petra.
Thank you, Dave. And we've got 3 excellent experts who are going to talk to us about how they're shifting and pivoting in this time. And Dave, we'd love your feedback on that when they're done. So I am just going to pass it over to Roisin, who is one of our awesome youth in the county, and has been introduced to me through my work at Citizens Climate Lobby. She is a junior at Aragon High School. We're very lucky to have her in our community. So throw it over to you and take 5 or 7 minutes and share with us what's going on in the youth community from your perspective. Do I have to unmute you?
No, I got it. Hi, guys.
Great.
So I'm at CCL Aragon, and with the Citizens Climate Lobby is pushing forward a carbon fee and dividends in members of Congress. But because we're at a high school, we also have the role of an environmental club. So we do a lot of work with climate strikes, Earth Day events, petitions, and all the other stuff that a normal high school does, high school environmental club does. We have a project that we're streamlining waste in with YCAN, and we are doing several petitions right now. So next slide, please. So pretty much the same problems we faced, the problems we faced in quarantine are the same ones that everyone is facing right now. So I won't go into this in a lot of detail, but the problem that we are dealing with the most is that it's hard to motivate students and we can't see them in person. So adjusting to Zoom has definitely been a difficult time, but I highly recommend switching to evening presentations instead of morning ones. We did that at the beginning of switching to youth presentations, and it was really helpful because students usually get up at midday, and it can really increase attendance to do it later in the day. Next slide, please. So a lot of the projects we've done are actually fine under quarantine, and we're getting a lot more work done. So students are phone banking and letter writing to get climate conscious people in office, and CCL doesn't back any specific people that are running for office, but students do their own research and try to encourage people to run for office that we think would promote climate-friendly policy. And we contact local news stations to get our voices heard. A lot of media stations are interested in stories that aren't about the pandemic because, it's just constant talk about lockdown and stuff, and people really like a news story. We also switched Earth Day to online, and there's a lot of seminars that you can check out. There are a couple links that I'll share in the chat. But we also have a student email chain that I've linked below, and please share that with any other student members that you would know, because we're trying to get more people involved in just like the every week meetings. So that's at 1 p.m. every Saturday if you're interested. Next slide, please. So the projects going forward are basically the same. So we're still reaching out to members of Congress, but we're doing it online now. And that's actually been super helpful because we're going to see increased attendance, because before a lot of people couldn't afford to travel to DC or they didn't have the time. So we're expecting a huge jump in attendance, and the funds that we saved can go towards other climate causes, and you save carbon. So win-win-win. And we're also doing a lot more online events that aren't related to Earth Day. The link I have below is for climate careers events, and they have a really interesting speaker tomorrow that I definitely would recommend. I think there's a climate leadership seminar, and it's with one of the advisors to Governor Newsom on climate change. So that's really cool. We also have a change.org petition. We already have a couple hundred signatures on it, but that's on paper. So we're trying to switch to a digital one and get more signatures that way. And that's to add carbon parts per million to the weather report, which is really important because a lot of people have trouble connecting like the abstract concept of climate change with how it affects their everyday lives. And this is like an important data point that affects people's health. So we're hoping to get more signatures on that. Okay, that's it. Thanks.
Great, thanks. I love that last idea, and I had not thought of it, but it seems like, how many parts per million are we at? 417? Something like that.
418.
But it's, oh yeah, so, and it goes up. I mean, it really, that would be, that might open some eyes. Let the adult community know how we can support you. And the adult community on this call, I'll send out all these links to, I'm sure we all know high school students or youth that are inspired to get involved. Roisin's got a group going, so please connect the dots whenever you can. The next presentation is Emma Shlaes, who works for Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, which has been instrumental in helping city councils move towards green, clean, open streets. And she's going to talk a little bit about that. All of you guys expressed an interest in the last meetings we've had on this topic. So it'd be interesting to hear from an expert on this topic. So Emma, will you take it away? Do I need to unmute you, or are you unmuted?
I think I unmuted.
Okay,
thank
great.
you. Thanks to Thrive for this opportunity, and also thanks to Supervisor Pine and the other elected officials who are on this call, who've been working on these concepts as well, and many other things related to coronavirus. So I know there's a lot going on. So hello everyone, I'm Emma Shlaes. I'm the Deputy Director at Silicon Valley Bike Coalition. And you can read our mission and vision here, but basically we just want to get more people biking. And we think that it has a lot of other benefits to the community and environment and economy. And we work throughout San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. So everywhere from Brisbane and Daly City down through Gilroy and Morgan Hill. That's our territory. Next slide. So later on, I'm going to talk about a survey that we have up that we want to hear more from you guys about how you're experiencing the streets. But Supervisor Pine kind of summed it up. There's less cars driving, there's less traffic. People are walking and biking out in their neighborhoods, staying close to home, but really utilizing their neighborhood networks. And we've seen bike sales go up. The bike shops are open. And we've heard a number of stories about kids learning to bike for the first time right now, and also people just like getting their dusty bike out of the garage and getting back on that bike. So these are all great, heartwarming stories, and we're trying to encourage that as much as possible. We're sending out tips on our email list every week. We just wrapped up a webinar series with commute.org to do lunchtime webinars on different bike topics. So that's kind of the context that we're in. But one, kind of on the flip side is, well, streets are more empty, there's less traffic, cars, people driving are speeding more because, you know, there's just less people on the road driving, and so we have seen more speeding. And those two things intertwined kind of led to our activities I'm going to talk about. So next slide. So last month, after a few weeks of kind of seeing what was happening and taking inspiration from other cities around the world, we sent a letter to every city in San Mateo and Santa Clara counties, as well as the Board of Supervisors, with these 3 asks. And the first one is just about, it's actually pretty difficult to change the speed limit, but just publicizing a message for people to pay attention and slow down and be aware of their neighbors walking and biking. Adjusting signal timing is something that cities can do, so you don't just have like a straight green light, which can lead to people speeding. More space for people walking and biking, which I'll be talking about more in this presentation. And then also turning off the pedestrian buttons so that it's just automatic and people don't have to touch that surface. And we've seen a lot of great responses. I linked to our blog post at the bottom here. This goes into all of that in more detail of what we've heard back from the different jurisdictions, and a lot have taken action. I'm going to focus on the middle bullet, which is the open streets, slow streets kind of concept. So I can go to the next slide. So there are multiple cities in our area taking this concept and embracing it and implementing it. So Redwood City is one. There's a map of the program, and this is an example of what it looks like on the street from Redwood. Those are from Redwood City. If you're in Redwood City, I encourage you to post pictures with that hashtag. They are slow streets, Redwood City, so that everyone can kind of see what and experience it. It's weird because normally I would be up and down the peninsula biking all over, but I haven't gone to see a lot of these projects in person, so I'm relying on photos from everyone else. So Redwood City, they're one of the first to implement this program. You can go to the next slide. San Mateo as well. It was around within a week of each other, these 2 cities debuted this program. I'm sorry I don't have a map there, but Bay Meadows is one place where you can experience it. And there's other streets all over town. There's probably like 6 or 7 in total. Again, similar signage. And the overall concept, sorry to back up a little bit, but the concept is that the streets are closed to through traffic, but people who live on the street can still access, that's why if you can see in the pictures, cars can still move around these, but you're warned that people will be walking and biking using the street. And this is to allow for people to more safely social distance. So you've probably experienced, you're walking down the sidewalk, someone comes along, the sidewalk's very narrow, you have to veer into the street. So recognizing that that's our reality right now, cities are opening up the streets so that there's much more space for people to walk and bike. And not only just, you're walking down the street to get somewhere, but recognizing that we all need a little mental health break with some exercise, some outdoor time, and there may not be parks nearby, open space, backyards, front yards. Not everyone has access to these, so this is a way to allow that. And so residential access is still allowed. Deliveries, emergency vehicles, all of that is still allowed. And it's just letting people know who are driving down the street, you need to pay attention. There could be people using the street in a different way than normal. You can go to the next slide. This is Burlingame. They approved Carolyn Avenue, and they actually were able to totally shut it down because there aren't any residential on this stretch. It's Caltrain on one side and the high school on the other side. So that's really cool. Some great pictures there. And then the next slide talks about some of the other local programs. I couldn't go through all of them in detail with limited time, but Foster City has that stretch around Beach Park Boulevard closed. San Francisco, actually this map is already up to date or out of date. They added some new streets today, or announced some new streets today. So they're going to be doing additional streets. Oakland was kind of the first in our area, and the ultimate goal is to do 74 miles, and they're focused on streets that were already identified in their bike and pedestrian plan that was just finalized last year. So that's a great opportunity to look at those streets. And then Palo Alto also has a program. And no other cities so far in Santa Clara County. So it's great to see the leadership of San Mateo County and so many cities jumping on this program. Next slide. So we're also just thinking about what's going to happen after restrictions ease up, people maybe start going back to work, shelter in place ends in one form or another. And a lot of the trends we've been hearing about and anticipating are people are worried about taking public transit. So they don't want to use that. They may not want to use shared rides, carpooling, all of those things that we rely on to get people out of single occupancy vehicles may be less attractive due to the disease. So that's unfortunate. We want to prevent more and more people driving, because that also leads to greenhouse gas emissions, pollution, all of those bad things, and traffic. And honestly, our transportation systems, our highways just don't have the capacity for everyone in the Bay Area to drive to work. So we need to do something to prevent that. Next slide. So here are some of the things that we're thinking about. And again, I'll share our survey link so you can talk more about what you want to see in your community. But we want to make biking, walking, and transit safer and more convenient. Of course, these are always been our goals, but this is a really unique opportunity to rethink how we're using our streets and how people are getting around, and also, you know, take advantage of the fact that people are biking more and enjoying it and really loving the feeling. I know that I personally love to bike to work and on errands and stuff, and once you do it once, you kind of get the bug and you want to do it more. So retaining the slow streets pilots in one way or another, maybe it involves transforming them to bike boulevards, which is something that Palo Alto and Berkeley have a lot of, building out cities' bike and pedestrian plans. As I mentioned, that's something a lot of cities are either updating right now or have recently updated. So there's already a network of streets that cities and their residents have identified for improvements, and just prioritizing those improvements and funding those. Investing in public bike and scooter share. So that's something that has been around in one form or another, but we want to make sure it doesn't go away and it continues. So there may need to be a public investment so that that stays around. And these are, you know, a little, sorry, back to the previous slide, a little outside of our scope, but a lot, you may have seen a lot of news lately is talking about closing streets to allow for outdoor dining. I don't know if anyone in our area has approved it yet, but I know a lot of the cities are considering it for their downtown streets, and that will be great. So next slide is the link to the survey, and we can send this out after. I know you can't necessarily click on this. It's also on our website, and it's short, 10 minutes, and we're hoping to use that information to help figure out what our next steps are. And the final slide, you can stay involved and help this cause. We have a lot of opportunities to do that. So become a member, and you can help support this work, get our email list and other volunteer opportunities. Local teams, these are groups that we have in cities to kind of join together and strategize like what to do at the local level. And we have an online, we're taking our annual bike summit, which is a conference online. It'll be August 6th and 7th. So pretty soon we'll be announcing that information to register. And like I said, tag your pictures. You can take a look at other pictures and let us know how you're experiencing the streets out there.
Awesome, thank you so much. I was sorry, I skipped ahead a slide. I was looking for the hand clap because I just love the work that you guys are doing. And I want to make a shameless plug to support our local organizations, our nonprofits. We're so lucky to have these, and Emma's part of a group that's not a just one-man show or two-man show. There's a lot of work behind this, a lot of policy work. and organizing it. And if you can't support these organizations, find someone who bikes a lot and let them know that this organization and Acterra are out there doing great work for us. And I know they get good support, but always could use more support. So great work, a really interesting topic that I personally want to know more about the bike sharing programs, and maybe we'll get someone, I'll ask that, or we'll get someone to ask that in our next session. But I want to move to Laura Weston, who is the new executive director of Acterra, although it's been 1 year now. Just released their new strategy and website, and excited to see what potential they will achieve in the coming years under her leadership. So Lauren, are you unmuted?
I am.
Okay, great. And I also will say, before you jump in, because I sent you this today, that the survey that we released said basically that electrifications of building and transit is what we should be focusing on, in addition to a number of other things, including these open streets. But this goes exactly to what you want to talk about today.
Yeah, thank you. I was so excited to see those survey results because it just adds credibility to the very long strategic planning process that we underwent this year. I started last June, so I'm almost at my year point with Acterra, and one of the main things I needed to focus on in that first year was kind of revamping our 50-year-old organization. We've been around since 1970. And over a 6-month period, we did focus groups, we did one-on-one interviews, we did market and landscape analysis, and key initiatives came from that, one of which is beneficial electrification, which is clearly in alignment with what your 68 respondents are concerned with, both in the house and in transit, or in commercial properties as well. And the other is food, which we don't have time to talk about today, but that's one of the key factors of Acterra's work moving forward. And so much of that has overlap with what goes on in the home around clean energy use. And one of our programs is induction cooking. So it's just nice to see that so much of our hard work is paying off, because it's where the direction of this work should be going. So thank you so much for the introduction. Thank you for allowing me to be here today. I'm looking forward to the breakout sessions after this, and any questions you may have about the work of Acterra. You can skip to the next slide. Welcome to Beneficial Electrification for All. This is the new title of our one of our key strategic initiatives for Acterra. We've done for 50 years work in the homes of local residents, and one of our key takeaways from this deep dive we've done into research over what our community's needs are is that electrification, leveraging clean energy, is one of the most important things we can be helping our communities do. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we've been around since 1970. We're celebrating our 50th year this year. We, in fact, had to take our 50th anniversary celebration party online the end of March. And so we celebrated with our community virtually, which was the first event of many that we've now done online. And I'm grateful that it happened that way, because everyone was so grateful and celebratory that it really kicked off our online programming in a very positive way. And in fact, in that event, one of the key things that we ask ourselves continually and as a community is, what can I do? And Acterra is leaning into this CCA, clean energy, leveraging clean energy and renewable electricity. There's a lot of competitive rate work going on right now with our local CCAs. And that's one of the key things that Acterra is going to be focusing on now and in the immediate future. We also want to be helping our community take big and immediate steps to reduce carbon emissions. In a lot of ways, this has been promoted because we're sheltering in place, and we're seeing such intrinsic response to emissions reductions. People are making the connection to how their actions hurt our planet, and it's helping our work in a lot of ways that we're all sheltering in place together. The big key takeaway for us after this is, how do we continue that awareness and that feeling of connection to the planet in the work we continue to do as Acterra in our community and together as nonprofits in the Bay Area. The thing that we do largely to make these things happen is we partner and support locally governed agencies supporting clean energy investment, innovation, and transformation. We will continue to do that work. We've been successful in our partnerships with PCE and SVCE and other organizations throughout the Bay Area for many years, and we know that that's going to be something we continue to focus on in the future. Next slide, please. As we passed this initiative around beneficial electrification, we focused on two key main areas. One is the materials and strategies that are necessary for wider adoption of fossil-free devices and technologies in both commercial properties and residential properties. We're doing this through partnerships, through increased research, and through field experts. We're actually going to be bringing on a Climate Corps fellow dedicated to policy and advocacy starting July 1. That's an investment our organization is making because we know we need to lean into decision makers and having access to them and asking for the right things. We want to be in those conversations and we want to be leading those conversations, and we'll be doing that through a Climate Corps fellow who's joining us in July. We have also brought on a Climate Corps fellow specifically for beneficial electrification. We've already been working for many years in transportation. We have an EV program that's been very successful throughout the Bay Area, and focusing on transportation is a huge piece for us as we come out of sheltering in place, because we don't want this mad rush to people being solo in their cars without the thoughtful decision-making process around what an EV could do as we come out of sheltering in place. We want to be providing those options for people, and we actually just added to our website a checklist for people thinking about going EV. So if you're interested in checking that out, please visit our website. The second goal for beneficial electrification for all is this consistent and constant barrage of outreach to professionals on the benefits of fossil-free devices in construction, as well as the education of our residents on the benefits of fossil-free devices in homes. The way we've started this, for many years, we've been doing how to save energy, how to save money, going to LED light bulbs, all of those tips and tricks in the house, which you'll see in a slide coming up. But we've dedicated consistent energy around induction and cooking demos, because this has been a gateway for us to have continued conversation around electrifying your household. Not only does it lead into conversations for us talking about EV charging infrastructure, which is also huge for programming within Acterra, because we want to have accessible charging both in residences, multifamily homes, and in communities. Induction cooking right now in particular is such a way to get into people's households, because we're being so thoughtful and intentional about how we're eating the food we're eating, how we're shopping. And so those two things are so closely aligned. We're leveraging both how we cook, how we eat what we eat, with the induction technology to make sure that we're promoting clean energy in households. And we're also promoting plant-forward diets at the same time, which is a win-win. Go ahead and to the next slide. Our past has been on the easy things that we can do to save money and use clean energy in residences and commercial properties. We have focused on what your energy assets are in your household and in your commercial properties, what the stuff is that you have that burns electricity, and personal behaviors. We're still leveraging these topics and conversations within households, but we're also really digging into the policy conversation and how do we come to the table, partner with other organizations to move the needle at a decision maker level. We're finding now, because of sheltering in place, we've seen a reduction in carbon emissions, but we know the numbers are not enough to get us to where we want to go. And so Acterra is really focused on how do we make the right decisions as communities, and that's the next step for us. Next slide. And this is just general contact information. I'd love to connect with all of you outside of this lovely session hosted by Thrive. I am digging into this work. I love it. Our team, earlier you mentioned that we're the experts on the panel. I am not an expert at this. This is not my background. I'm learning this as I go. And so I love having conversations with people in the community because I'm continually learning and soaking this information up. So if there's something I should know or information you want to share and spread the wealth of information, please let me know. I'm always open for that. And then, of course, attending any of our events that you'll find on the website as we think about leaving this sheltering situation we all find ourselves in, the biggest thing Acterra is focused on is continuing stellar programming. We want to be reaching our community in meaningful ways and providing them information that matters in the moment and beyond. We also are poised in this period that feels like limbo to come out of it very prepared to take action. We want our communities to be engaged and empowered so that they're finding their voice and able to participate at the table in these decision-making conversations. And we're just really honored to be part of this, to be preparing for this week, to be preparing for this work, and to be paving the road for the work ahead. So any questions, I'm open for it, and thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much to all three of our panelists. There's something nice to be focusing a little bit on the positive and what kind of positive change can come out of this and what kind of positive change has already started. So I'd like to give it back to Supervisor Pine for a couple of minutes to talk about any feedback you have on the on what's going on or any of the advocacy that these organizations are doing. Supervisor Pine?
Sure. Well, I too, share your enthusiasm for hearing about all this positive work and talking about things other than the pandemic. I mean, it's very impressive how all three groups have been, so innovative and resilient during this time. I mean, this is not easy when all of a sudden, you can't have in-person meetings and you can't have fundraisers and you can't be with your peers at school. So, really kudos to everyone for adapting and so quickly. Just a couple comments, with Roisin. I'm a big fan of carbon fee and dividend, and I love the fact that you're reaching out to members of Congress. It reminds us, of course, that we have an enormously important election this fall, and then locally too. Remember that most of our city councils have moved to these elections in even years. So, I mean, a tremendous number of city council meetings, elections, more than ever in one election. So perhaps an opportunity to find some good candidates to support. And the youth voice is just so important in the work we're doing. So thank you, Roisin. And then, Emma, the work that you're doing is so fascinating. A lot of behavior has changed so radically now. With people biking and people not going to work, right? People telecommuting. So, the question that I've been just thinking about, I know many are, is, how much of this behavior is going to stick? It wouldn't take a lot of telecommuting to significantly drop our carbon emissions and really reduce congestion, on our streets. But the future is of course unknown. I do serve on the Caltrain board, and we're really worried about when will people get back on the train, because Caltrain has been so successful, and during the rush hour, it's not uncommon to have 130% capacity, or people standing and taking up almost every inch of the train. And when will people feel comfortable doing that again? Something that has a big financial implication for Caltrain. And then on Lauren and Acterra, I love your focus on building electrification. Peninsula Clean Energy is really moving in this direction as well. We were all very involved in the REACH codes prior to COVID. I think we probably lost some momentum with COVID in terms of pushing those further. But as everyone knows, REACH codes are for new construction. And, we have such a big, it's so important to deal with existing buildings and electrification of existing buildings. So PCE is looking at investing upwards of $6 million to work on such things as, heat pump water incentives, a really substantial low-income healthy home program. And somebody stumbled across a company called Harvest Thermal that has come up with some technology that combines residential space and water heating into like a unified system, because it's very complicated, very expensive to upgrade these systems. And apparently they are on to something that may be much more cost efficient. So great work, everyone. Really excited to hear about it.
Thank you, Supervisor Pine. I the plan for the next 20, 25 minutes is first we're going to do some Q&A from the audience, and I'd actually love it if you would just put your questions in chat, just because we have a large number of people on the call. I think it'll be the easiest way to manage it. So you can go ahead and start putting in questions if you have any for any of our panelists or for Supervisor Pine. And then after that, we're going to do optional breakout rooms. So Emma will host one to talk about slow streets. And then actually each of our panelists will host one, and you can just put in the chat which breakout room you want to be in, and that'll just be a totally informal, conversational thing for anybody who would like to continue on after we're done with the Q&A. There's one thing that I forgot, and I'm kind of embarrassed, but I wanted to thank both Peninsula Clean Energy and Mid-Penn Open Space District for their support of our Thrive environmental sustainability. So thank you very much to them. Are there any questions out there?
You can also raise your hand. I think people are getting good at raising their hand at this point on Zoom, right? Although I've got to be able to see them. I think they come to the top. So if you have a question, raise your hand. Larry's got a hand.
Okay,
Larry, why don't you?
Oh, sorry, we have a question first from Alan. Alan, who is a question for Supervisor Pine, and it's not a fun question, but what is the forecast for the county's budget, and how might this affect the Office of Sustainability?
Yeah, well, every level of government is going to be under immense budget pressure with the drop in revenues because of all the damage done to the economy because of COVID. You know, government is needed most when we have the least revenue, you know, to take, in particularly county government, where we have responsibilities for, you know, basic needs and health and food assistance. So it's going to be hard decisions. You know, I'm going to advocate vigorously that we make sure we continue to invest in Office of Sustainability and in our environmental initiatives, and you know, because ultimately you could save a few dollars in the short run, but in the long run the expense is extreme, and the risk to all of us is so extreme. It will be hard to keep everything at this. The pressure, there'll be pressure to make reductions, but I hope we can keep those minimal.
Thank you. Larry, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Petra. Question for Dave, or really any of the panelists. We've heard the anecdotal information, obviously, that in terms of a sustainability environment, we have better measures, but I'm wondering if we actually are getting detailed data every day on these and various measures, and also eventually to be broken down by the each phase that we're in terms of SIP exit, because I think that the more detailed data we would have, Dave and others, it's going to be a far more powerful for us for a planning tool, policymakers into the future. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
So Larry, what type of data are you referencing?
Well, the very obvious ones, obviously pollution measures, noise, traffic congestion, other typical environmental measures that, and obviously many of those now are benefiting because of the SIP.
Emma, is Silicon Valley Bike Coalition collecting the number of miles ridden on bikes or things like that? Is there metrics? Or any?
No, not particularly.
Well, I think it's important to do this because, Dave, because when you get to the policy level for the county and cities, you really need the data makes a far better, stronger case. Is that true, Dave?
Well, yeah, we love data, and I mean, and there's certainly in the transportation world, there's a lot of good data being collected in terms of you know, traffic levels and public transit use. So I don't know, I'm not aware of kind of a real systematic to pull it all together. But you know,
Survey.
some of it tracked is always tracked and has been continued to be tracked during this time.
Yeah, I actually ran something by the people over at SSMC, San Mateo County, because to me they'd be logical people, since they do maintain the indicators program, that they would be the people I would hope to delve into this a little more specifically.
Thank you, Larry.
Yeah, and Emma's got a survey too. I think survey data is helpful.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we don't ask particularly like how far people are traveling, because we're just anticipating right now people are mostly like around their neighborhoods. They're not going, you know, in the normal times, people, you know, in our network bike anywhere from like 1 mile to 30 miles to get to work on a daily basis. So we know that we have data from the normal times, but in terms of mileage right now, it's just not something we're tracking.
Emma, can I ask what's going on with bike share and scooter share programs? Because we've had them and loved them. They left.
Bike share changes almost every single day. Honestly, like the time I've been working on this since I think Bay Area Bike Share came out in 2013, there's just been constant changes. So right now in the Bay Area, the only bike share operator is Lyft. So it's Bay Wheels, formerly Ford Go Bike was what it was called before. And they're in San Francisco, San Jose, Oakland, Berkeley, and Emeryville, I believe. So that's the only bike share program. It's owned by Lyft now. And they also have scooters in some of the cities. Lime scooters, they no longer have bike share. I think that they're redeploying. They had initially taken scooters out when this came in, like the shelter in place order went in. And I think they're starting to put them out again. They recently acquired Jump Bikes, which was owned by Uber. I won't go into all the details, but those are basically the two companies. There are a few other scooter companies, but it'll remain to be seen like what happens after this pandemic, because they've suffered a lot of job cuts and different issues. But in other cities, we have seen bike share usage go up, like New York City, for instance. They have had a boom in bike share, I think because people are avoiding taking public transit, the subway, and bike share feels safer to those people. So I think that it's a really great time to invest more in bike share, as people may still shy away from using transit. And just, you know, there's obviously practices for transit and bike share and scooter share that can make them more hygienic and everything. But you're out on your own in the fresh air, so that's a good opportunity.
Is the disruption in the market the reason our cities aren't jumping in and jumping on?
Sorry, what was the first part of your question?
Why aren't our cities jumping back into this? Seems like it'd be a great time. Is it because the market is, the owners are changing and?
Yeah, it's really complicated, unfortunately. Like a lot of the cities here, as you may remember, South San Francisco, San Mateo, other cities had bike share with Lime, and then they just dissolved their bike share aspect. So I think it's taken a while for the cities to either establish guidelines for how to have bike or scooter share in their cities, and then with the companies constantly changing, it's like a moving target, so it hasn't been easy. Yeah. That's why we kind of support going back to the public model, where it may be owned by the public, by a city or, you know, another agency, and then operate, like just hire an operator.
Got it. Were there other questions in the chat box?
Yes. Oh, well, there's one from Josh. Josh, you want to just go ahead and unmute yourself and ask the question.
Sure. I'm putting my old housing hat back on. We saw from 2008, this massive consolidation of the housing market, a lot of speculation going on, a massive increase in jobs, very little housing production in relative terms. And how do we avoid that same mistake? Does telecommuting take the pressure off because people can live remotely? And I'm talking about office workers, probably tech workers, because lower income workers often don't have that ability to telecommute. They're working retail, they're working within the restaurant establishments. How do we reverse that trend where I stopped tracking it when the number was 63% of the workforce in San Mateo County commuted from outside of the county, and that ticked up about a percent a year. Is this an opportunity to reverse that trend, and what would it take to do that? Because there are significant VMTs associated with that commute, and certainly equity issues.
Who was that to?
I know, I was, I thought Dave, but then it's like, oh, Janet's here too. Or it could be to anybody, to be honest. Maybe it's a rhetorical question, something to think about.
Yeah.
Dave here. Certainly the pandemic crisis has, I think, shined a light on the serious equity issues we have as a society. Those who are least fortunate have been the hardest hit by this pandemic, in terms of, particularly in terms of the economic impacts. And we've seen, what a kind of fragile system we have in terms of lack of paid sick leave and other kind of fundamental benefits that are common in most Western industrialized countries. So, again, at a very high level, I hope that will open up the eyes of some people to look at these equity issues more seriously. Maybe different. I'm just something different than you asked about, but I just add those comments.
There's a question from Ann Schneider. We should have acknowledged. Can you guys hear me? Yeah. Acknowledged other local elected officials. Ann Schneider, councilwoman from Millbrae, vice mayor, I believe, right? And Janet Morgans from Redwood City. Awesome to have you guys on and to have you guys as environmental champions in our city. So thank you both. And they both have their hands up. I guess they're high-fiving each other. Ann, you want to just unmute and ask a question? And Janet, you're welcome to jump in too. And then we'll close.
Ann, you were first. Go ahead. Ann, you're going to unmute yourself. There you go.
I think I unmuted. Hey, Janet. Hello, everyone. This is to the question that was posed to Emma. We literally met with Lime Bikes to sign the to discuss the contract. We were going to sign the next day, and they pulled out bicycles. So for us and the amount of work that staff, no matter the size of the city, does to make sure that we've dotted all the I's and have that happen is really frustrating. I hadn't heard about the public option. Love it. However, now that our budgets are so drastically reduced and some cities are already doing layoffs, we're simply not hiring to fill spots right now. The ability to get the money to buy the bikes is difficult, but maybe we collectively, plus the time for a small city to write a grant, maybe regionally, either county-wise or north, central, south county, we could work together. We also here at Millbrae wanted to do what Burlingame and San Bruno were doing, so we didn't have that problem of too many companies operating over city boundary lines. So Emma, maybe the public option is really the way to go, and I need to learn more about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's like at Berkeley, like no one's using that right now locally. That was how it was before. So, you know, the public take or the private takeover of bike share. I don't know. It's been a long road, but yeah, I know that Caltrain has been working on a study about bike share. Maybe that's an option. Maybe Samtrans and BTA are an option. You know, there's different agencies that I'd love to see a regional, you know, program as well.
Just to, I don't know if you're still our contact, but we're having our first CCAG BPAC meeting next Thursday. So it's coming back since January, our last meeting. So I will try to suggest that to Michaela.
Cool.
And let me just, if I can add a little bit on to that. So I am Janet Borgens, I'm a Redwood City Council member, and I have been, I will confess to everybody on this call, a pushback for all electric. And it's not because I don't think we need it. It's not because I don't believe the science or any of you on this call. And that the reason I'm on this call is the more I can learn, the better. And I have really learned a lot just being on this call. So I appreciate each and every one of you. There are a couple of things we talked about being equity. And I think some of the issues is to make it very clear. So I have allergies, forgive me for my, so I think the equity part of it is sometimes people just don't understand. There's either too much to read about an issue or too many big decisions they have to make. So I really, really like the idea that Roisin had about making sure that we add the report of the carbon to the weather report. I think just like we do allergy season, just like we do air quality, I think if you start getting that phrase more, you know, more heard, more recognized, and people will wake up and go, okay, you think you know what it is, you don't know what it is, you get on calls like this, and then you start realizing all the efforts that are out here and why we're doing it. To Emma's discussion regarding bicycles, totally agree. I've been back on my bike now for about 6 months, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. But what I have noticed since shelter in place is bicyclists are not stopping at stop signs because there's less traffic out here. And they know what they're doing. I know they're looking down the street and looking both ways, but I'm a new one out there. And so it gets a little bit concerning. So I just want to make sure we put a big shout out to the Bicycle Coalition that, okay, guys, you know, help us out here, help us really promote how healthy it really is. And to make sure that we're all, because the cars are definitely going much faster, and they too are not stopping at stop signs because there's less traffic. They slow down, they look both ways, they scoot out there. And I have driven all around Redwood City and experienced all of this. I 100% support the slow streets. I think we should have more of that. I did walk the streets before we did that and found out that in one in particular, there was a higher pedestrian concern with me because cars, it was a very congested street and cars coming out of driveways weren't looking at or for pedestrians or bicyclists. And so therefore there was a bigger concern. And so I did express that. So I think there's a huge learning curve for all of us, especially during this time. I do agree with the comment that was in the chat that says now more than ever is the right time to start celebrating health in place, and working from home has cleaned our air, because I've heard it from everybody, even those that have pushed back on the science has said, wow, what a difference. There's a huge difference in the way we can breathe and the way we can move around now. So I think the really bringing out that carbon emissions is huge, and the lack of the pollutants that we're putting in the air right now. So I'm excited to be here because I have to learn more. And I want to learn more about this. I don't believe I'm a pushback anymore. I do believe that moving forward, we can definitely have these fuller conversations, but the equity piece is huge for me. So I want to make sure that as we move forward, no matter what our policies are, that we bring along the capability of those less fortunate in our community to be able to attain what we all want to. And so therefore, I want to make sure that we partner those. And that conversation, I think, is being had on all of your conversations. Every one of you have brought up that piece. So I will be probably bouncing in and out of some of those chat rooms or those meetings, because I want to learn a little bit more from each of you. So thank you for all of this. Thank you, Supervisor Pine, for being the champion of clean energy and moving forward with this. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. I want to take that opportunity with all those lovely thank yous to continue with our thank yous. We at Thrive always try to look at things through an equity lens. So I appreciate you bringing that up. And I think that all of the groups here really do understand the importance of equity kind of as an underlying goal for everything that we're doing. But I appreciate you calling it out. Our next meeting is on June 18th, same time, same Zoom channel. We will send that out to all of you. Please send a note to Doug if you want to continue in for 15-minute discussions with any of our panelists. And
I think we'll just randomly break people up. It might be too hard at this point with this amount of time left. But yeah, we'll randomly break you up. You can say hi to each other and share some thoughts about the speakers. But I also just want to, I'd love to comment on the public-private partnerships being developed and looking at the faces here. I think 25% of you who signed up were from government, 50% from nonprofit. There's obviously a couple of youth here and youth mentors, and then a couple business people. It's just great. I think that I really passionately, Petra knows this, I say this all the time, passionately believe that that's what we need, this cross-sector collaboration and leadership to drive change. We can't just expect our elected officials to do the work for us, and it's great that we have advocacy-based nonprofits like Acterra and Silicon Valley Bike Coalition, but everyone plays a role in this. All right, I'm going to create 2 breakout rooms, and hang on and just enjoy 10 minutes talking to your friends or make new friends, and maybe just ask us questions you didn't get to ask.